Till now, we used to save it on our computer. It used to occupy the space on our computer. But now, storing, sharing, collaborating, all of these things are done at a specific place inside. Even a little space inside, which is for Vandana ma'am or which is for Santosh ma'am. A small space is created, so there is a storage space for each account. So if you have seen
पैसा कितना खर्चना पड़ता है बच्चों के लिए भी एक तो वो वहां रह रहा है क्या फ्लैट ले
A very good evening and a warm welcome to the one-week online National Faculty Development Program on Teaching Literature in Digital Era. And today is the fourth day and the topic is Shakespeare in the Digital Era. Let me start by welcoming our resource person, Mr. V.G. Chandra Mohan. I wholeheartedly welcome the participants and members of Faculty of Congo Arts and Science College. It is my pleasure to introduce our chief guest, Mr. V.G. Chandra Mohan, former professor at Anna University. His areas of specialization are multimedia, Shakespeare, dramas, British literature. He was the recipient of scholarship and to attend International Systematic Functional Congress at Macquarie University, Sydney. He acted as a judge in the Education UK Slow Contest organized by the British Council, Chennai. He served as the British Council trainer and examiner for the speaking test of Business English Certificate Preliminary, Vantage and Higher. He served as a multimedia language lab consultant and resource person for Anna University. Train the Trainers program. He has presented papers in 9 national seminars and 15 international conferences. He was invited to 32 guest lectures. So far, he has attended 18 seminars and conferences. Sir, the session is yours. Over to you, sir.
Hi, Pradeep. I'm Shweta. I'm a huge fan of yours. Thank you so much. Actually,
Video ಅಲ್ಲ. ಇದೊಂದು ಬಾಕಿ ಇದೆ. ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲೇ ಶಾಕ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ.
आज बना रहे थे तो मैम तो थी नहीं.
ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಸ್ಟಾಪ್ ವಿಡಿಯೋ
ஸ்டாப் வீடியோ ஸ்டாப் ஆயிடுச்சு சொன்னாங்க.
உங்க ஃபேஸ் வர இல்ல சைட்ல வர முடியாது.
ஸ்டாப். சோ எப்படி இப்ப ஸ்டாப் பண்ணலாமா? நீங்க பேசுறீங்களா?
பேசிட்டு
பேசிட்டு ஆரம்பிங்க. சோ நீங்க பேசி முடிச்சிட்டு உங்க ஃபேஸ்
வருதுன்னு பார்த்துருவோம். சைட்ல ரெண்டையும் சைட்ல வர. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir. But could you please little bit more audible?
Yes. சவுண்ட் ஐக்கான் எடுத்துக்கோங்க சார் இங்கே
இங்க
மேலே சிஸ்டம் சவுண்ட் ஐக்கான் இருக்குல்ல அது ஹையாக இருக்கா பாருங்க.
It's perfectly audible to you, sir.
ஆடிபிள்ங்கிறாங்களே
உங்க face தெரியுது. Face தெரியுது.
தெரியுதா?
Blurry.
ரைட். இது ஆடியோ வருது இல்லை?
ஆடியோ வருது.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Shall I start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can start, please.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, sir.
Okay. Today, we are going to look at Shakespeare's popularity. He continues to be popular even after 400 years. And we are going to look at some of the reasons why he continues to be popular in this digital age with the help of some ICT resources. Before we proceed, let us check some facts about Shakespeare. We all know that he was born in 1564, the year in which another famous dramatist, Christopher Marlowe, was born. But we don't remember Christopher Marlowe as much we do Shakespeare. He was not educated at university. He attended only the grammar school and he knew small Latin and less Greek. But he has achieved a lot. And he wrote dramas primarily for the Elizabethan audience. And in keeping it the spirit of the age,
Sir, Chandramohan sir. Am I audible, sir? Do you hear me?
Madam. Yasmin, madam.
Yes, sir.
Okay, madam. Okay, madam.
Can you please see the screen?
Is
Yes,
it
ma'am, I
visible?
can see the screen.
Okay, great, great. It's visible, right?
It's visible, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Sound increase.
இதுலதான் பிரச்சனை வருதுன்னு பார்த்தல.
No switch.
பென்ட்ரைவ் எடுக்க முடியாது.
இல்ல பென்ட்ரைவ் எடுக்கலாம்.
ஒரு யூஎஸ்பி தான் இருக்கு. ரெண்டு இருக்கா? இல்ல.
Shall I continue?
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay. I was just telling you that we quote Shakespeare all the time without knowing it. And here is a TED talk.
You've been eating Pop-Tarts. I resisted. It looked fantastic, though. Well, now, what a day we're having. Absolutely inspirational, fantastic. I saw Romeo Dallaire remark on these geese earlier on, and I considered these geese Canada geese. They're all over the world, you know. They're taking over the world. They're like Shakespeare. Shakespeare surrounds us. Shakespeare we're enormously familiar with, but the Shakespeare that we know and we don't know. And of course, every day we're quoting Shakespeare, but we don't know it. Shakespeare, we don't know a great deal about the man. What we know about him is generally through his works. He was a man, just like you and me. He lived his life, felt great joy, great sadness, tremendous success, and great tragedy. In Canada, talk about Shakespeare surrounding us. We have the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario. That's the biggest theatre festival, I might add, in North America. We have, that's right. We have Bar on the Beach Shakespeare here in Vancouver. We got Shakespeare festivals in between. In America, Americans love their Shakespeare. You have Ashland, Oregon, lots of Shakespeare's festivals through America. You have the Globe in London, and of course, the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford upon Avon. So Shakespeare is alive and well. But since you leapt out of bed this morning, and you've had this wonderful day here, I'm sure most of you are very much unaware that you've been quoting Shakespeare all day. Let me give you a bunch of examples. First of all, I want you to do something for a change. When I point at you and beckon you on, I want you to say, quoting Shakespeare. Now come on with all that energy from the Pop-Tarts. Give it a go. That's pretty good. Once more, even louder. If you cannot understand my argument and declare it's Greek to me, you are? If you claim to be more sinned against than sinning, you are? If you recall your salad days, you are? If you act more in sorrow than in anger, if your wish is father to the thought, if your lost property has vanished into thin air, you are? If you've ever refused to budge an inch or suffered from green-eyed jealousy, if you've been played fast and loose, been tongue-tied, a tower of strength, hoodwinked, or in a pickle, if you have knitted your brows, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, stood on ceremony, danced attendance on your lord and master, laughed yourself into stitches, had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing. If you've seen better days or lived in a fool's paradise, why, be that as it may, the more fool you, for it is a foregone conclusion that you are, as good luck would have it. If you think it is early days and clear out bag and baggage, if you think it is high time and that is the long and the short of it.
So this is a practical demonstration of how we are quoting Shakespeare all the time in our daily life. And Shakespeare has got an enduring appeal, and he remains the world's most influential poet and dramatist. Even his harsh critic, Ben Jonson, said he was not of an age, but for all time. Now, 4 centuries later, Jonson's words still ring true. And the 2012 London Olympics celebrated Shakespeare as a cultural event. To give you an example of his cosmic reach, even the planet Uranus, which has 27 moons or satellites, the majority of which are named after Shakespearean characters. Titania, Oberon, and Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream, Ariel, Miranda, Caliban, Prospero from The Tempest, Cordelia from King Lear, Ophelia from Hamlet, and we can go on and on. With a few exceptions, a majority of the moons are named after Shakespearean characters. This is an example of the bard's cosmic reach. Shakespeare remains refreshingly new. Every time we read Shakespeare, we get a new meaning. That's why Bruce Smith said, Shakespeare reveals a different face to different cultures and different people at different times. And this is another reason why we never tire of seeing the same play over and over again. Let us look at some expert opinions on how Shakespeare got so popular. We have got Let Us Talk Shakespeare podcast from Stratford-upon-Avon by the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. Here, some of the world's renowned scholars address some of the frequently asked questions about Shakespeare's life. Before that, a podcast is an audio program just like talk radio. And a podcast is a series of spoken word audio episodes, all focused on a particular topic or theme. And this series of 10 episodes were brought to us by the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. And let us play the audio for bye.
Hello and welcome to the 10th and final episode of Let's Talk Shakespeare, a podcast brought to you from Stratford-upon-Avon by the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. I'm Jennifer Reid, and today I'm asking, how did Shakespeare get so popular? Now, in previous episodes of this podcast, I've spoken to lots of different experts and practitioners to get to an answer. And in essence, that's what I'm doing today, except that the time we have is not nearly enough to cover such a huge subject. So instead, my clips today will be touching on lots of different reasons and theories about why Shakespeare became and remains so popular today. And we'll be jumping about a bit in the timeline again. So my first clip is from Michael Dobson, who's the director of the Shakespeare Institute, and he's going to tell us a bit about Shakespeare's fame during his own lifetime and introduce us to some of the ideas coming up in this episode.
Shakespeare got very popular in his own lifetime, and in fact, from very early in his own career, his narrative poem Venus and Adonis is about his most popular printed work right through his career. As early as 1593, he has an overnight sensation with that poem, which everybody finds tremendously erotic, tremendously charming, tremendously classical. There are many allusions to it. It's a bestseller. There's only one surviving copy of the first edition. It was read to death, possibly in some fairly unsalubrious ways, but the copy in the Bodleian Library, which is the one that survives, is at least clean. His plays, once they start getting into print, very soon start getting into print with his name on them in the fourth part.
Let us stop here and look at the textual version of the podcast. Michael Dobson, the director of the Shakespeare Institute, is telling us a bit about Shakespeare's fame during his own lifetime. His poem was an overnight sensation, and Henry IV Part 1 went through multiple editions, and his plays were considered to be good, and people felt that there was something special about his talent. And plays like Hamlet and Merchant of Venice were adapted into German, and Shakespeare became folk art as well as high art, according to Michael Dobson. The next expert is Elizabeth Dollymore, who is the learning manager at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. And according to her, as with most popular people, there were people who liked Shakespeare and people who did not like Shakespeare. And this happens with great people. To be great is to be liked and disliked. And this was another sign that he was growing popular. During the Romantic period, Keats was said to have always carried a little portrait of Shakespeare wherever he went. And this tradition continued roughly to the Victorian period. And we start witnessing the beginning of people worshipping Shakespeare. He was taught at school and he got onto the curriculum. And the British Empire expanded. And with this colonial expansion, the playwright was exported to all the colonies. Because of this British Empire, he got translated into different languages and adapted by many different cultures. And Germany, in particular, had a special affection for him. It would often translate the plays afresh each time they were performed. But a really important event happened in the 18th century for the popularity of Shakespeare. The great actor David Garrick organized a Shakespeare Jubilee, and it was staged in September 1769 in Stratford-upon-Avon. And it was the first time that Shakespeare broke out of the playhouses and out of the libraries and got onto the streets among the people. And this led to the eventual purchase of Shakespeare's birthplace by the trust. According to Ben Crystal, a great actor, the reason why Shakespeare probably became popular then and is popular now is because he did not ever write what it was to be from Stratford-upon-Avon or Warwick or England. He wrote what it was to be human. And according to Sir Stanley Wells, the president of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, Shakespeare is more famous now than most of the other writers of his time. What are the reasons? Shakespeare wrote more plays than his contemporaries did. And they were much more varied plays. For example, Hamlet was a tragedy of a man who thought too much. King Lear was a tragedy of a man who thought too little. Romeo and Juliet and Antony and Cleopatra were love tragedies, but they were love tragedies with a difference. Romeo and Juliet was a tragedy of those who failed in love. And Antony and Cleopatra was a tragedy of those who succeeded in love. And Shakespeare told every kind of story: comedy, tragedy, history, melodrama, adventure, love stories, and fairy tales, and whatnot. And most of them happened to be good, and they were successful. And he was such a profound writer who gave the greatest sense of the value of human life. And his plays went on being performed, and every time it was performed, a new perspective, we got a new meaning, a new perspective. Though he wrote for the Elizabethan audience, he is read and enjoyed even today, not only by Englishmen, but by the English-speaking people all over the world. His works have been translated into all the important languages of the world, and the films based upon his dramas continue to draw packed houses. According to William Long, the author of History of English Literature, we can divide Shakespeare's works into 4 periods. The first period is a period of early experimentation. It was marked by youthfulness and exuberance of imagination. Here, Shakespeare gave importance to wordplay and pun. In the second period was a period of rapid growth and development, and it showed more careful and artistic work and better plots. And the third period was a period of gloom and depression, marking the full maturity of his powers. The last period was a period of restored serenity, of calm after storm. According to William Long, the best way to enjoy Shakespeare, or the best way to read Shakespeare, is to read in succession 4 plays, taking a typical work from each of the above periods. It's one of the best ways of getting quickly at the real life and mind of Shakespeare. Let us look at some typical plays of the periods concerned. During the first period, we get Comedy of Errors and Love's Labour's Lost. During the second period, we get plays like Romeo and Juliet, Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, and Midsummer Night's Dream. During the third period, we got the famous sonnets, Twelfth Night, and all the great tragedies, all the 4 great tragedies. And in the last period, we get plays like Coriolanus, Cymbeline, Winter's Tale, and The Tempest. We have to remember a point here. Shakespeare wrote his plays which were meant to be acted on the stage. They were not meant for armchair reading. That's why Shakespeare is not simply a bookish writer like John Milton or Alexander Pope, with whom you will have to sit down with a book and read. But with Shakespeare, you can only get the full Shakespearean experience when you see his plays acted. And you must see his plays acted, preferably in the theater, but also in the cinema. Here is a small video.
So I taught Craig said, come do as TED Talks for my students. And I thought, why? But I'm a professor. I get paid to talk for 50 minutes. So why? Why after 400 years? To plagiarize our gorgeous young prime minister and say, well, it's 2060. That's a start. And it's the easiest one, because 400 years and 6 days ago, on April 23rd, Shakespeare died. Prince died this week. He's had a lot of press. Would he still have that press 400 years from now? I don't know. Will there be a press 400 years from now? Probably not. So why? Why after 400 years? In 2012, during the London Olympics, lots of exciting things happened. One of them we probably all remember is the Lightning Man. Usain Bolt repeated it again on all those sprint events. Hundreds of thousands of people witnessed something else. Every Olympics matches sport with culture, and there's always a cultural Olympiad. In 2012 in London, they chose Shakespeare. There were over 100 productions between April the 23rd and the end of the event in November. 70 of those took place in the Globe Theatre. They represented countries, over 40 countries from around the world, and they were in 37 different languages. Why? Most of those countries had been colonized by the English. Having thrown off all the shackles of colonization, why had they kept Shakespeare? And why did they want to listen to Shakespeare in their own language? And why, when they came to London, did thousands of people living in London, whose origins were in those countries, come to listen to Shakespeare in the language into which they had been born? That's what I want to talk to you about today. The power of listening to Shakespeare. That's why I don't want a text up there, because that would contradict me. And that's why I'm glad we closed that book. When Shakespeare was first performed, and for well over 200 years, when people wrote about going to plays, when they wrote about going to a Shakespeare play or any play, they would write in their diary, they would write in their commonplace book, last night I went and I heard Midsummer Night's Dream. Last night I went and I heard Hamlet. No one ever wrote until well into the 19th century that they saw a play, because a play is about voice. And no one understood that more than Shakespeare did. We are there because it consoles us to hear a human voice. Because we want a voice to make sounds of joy and sorrow for us. Because what matters in life is what we apprehend, what we seize, what seizes us. Those things that make us terrified, those things that make us joyful. The theater brings those things.
So according to the scholar, we must listen to Shakespeare. In those days, whenever they went to the theater, they said they did not saw a Midsummer Night's Dream or Romeo and Juliet. They said they heard a Midsummer Night's Dream. That is what he suggested. And a play like A Midsummer Night's Dream, where we get a blend of realism and fancy, music and love, and all the spectacle, we will be able to enjoy and appreciate the play when we see it played, or at least we get a digital version, digital movie version. And we have got Shakespeare's top 10 movies.
The Bard tells stories like no one else.
If you have tears, prepare to shed them now.
Welcome to Ms. Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 Shakespeare movies. Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe for more great content. This
Share screen. மூவி எங்க இருக்கு? பவர் பாயிண்ட்ல இருக்கிறது விடுங்க. விண்டோஸ் மீடியா பிளேயர்
we're looking at the best film adaptations of Shakespeare's works, basing our picks on popularity and critical acclaim. We're excluding movies influenced by Shakespeare's works, such as 10 Things I Hate About You, as we're only counting direct adaptations.
You're not as violent as I thought you were.
Number 10, A Midsummer Night's Dream.
The course of true love never did run smooth.
This classic comedy that everyone had to read in high school tells the overly complex story of a love quadrangle, full of magical moments and otherworldly creatures, such as the beloved Puck.
This is the woman. But not this man.
While the plot has a tendency to get wrapped up in its own ambitions, this adaptation tells the story clearly and efficiently. It's also full of memorable performances from the likes of Kevin Kline, Christian Bale, and Stanley Tucci. The film captures the bard's eloquent speeches perfectly and excitingly brings the play's magical wonders to film.
Merry and tragical, tedious and brief, that is hot ice and wondrous strange snow.
Number 9, Romeo and Juliet. While Leonardo
And the next example is Julius Caesar, where we get an example of how the rhetoric works. And in this play, the center of interest is not the progress of Caesar, but it is the impact of the spirit of Caesar on his fellow Romans, particularly on Brutus, who must choose between his personal friendship for Caesar and his public responsibility. And we get two examples of rhetoric. At first, Brutus speaks, but he is tactless, rather blunt. He says, why did I kill Caesar? Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was valiant, I was proud. As he was ambitious, I slew him. And in a paragraph, what he says, whatever he wants to say, and leaves the stage. But Antony makes clever use of the stage. And here we have not only one of Shakespeare's most recognizable opening lines when he says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus has told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault." And he uses the words noble and ambitious with a note of sarcasm. And then he reminds the people of what Caesar did to the country. He has brought many captives home to Rome. Whose ransoms did the general coffers fill? Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yes, Brutus says he was ambitious. Sure, he is an honorable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause, but what cause withholds you then to mourn for him? And let us look at Mark Antony's speech.
He says, for Brutus' sake, he finds himself beholding to us all. Well, permit me to have a Brutus here, this Caesar, with a tyrant, that servant, we have blessed him. Romans, Renner, gentle Rome, peace, let us hear him. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault. Grievously had Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honorable man, so are they all honorable men. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious. And Brutus is an honorable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. If this in Caesar seem ambitious, when that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious. Brutus is an honorable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him a kingly crown which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious. And sure, he is an honorable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? Judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me. My heart is there with Caesar. And I must pause till it come back to me. you in his place, marking his words. He would not take them out. Therefore, you certainly was not ambitious. There's not a nobler man in Rome than Anthony. But yesterday, the word of Caesar might have stood against the world. Now lies he there, none so poor to do him reverence. Oh, masters, I would dispose to stir your heart.
And Shakespeare thus understood the power of language. And another important area where he did so well was characterization. In this field, he reigned supreme. He could endow historical and imaginary characters with life, not in bits and pieces, not intermittently, but constantly. All the characters are alive, they grow, change, and evolve before the very eyes of the readers. Let me refer to an actual incident. A Japanese student was asked if he could understand and sympathize with the characters in As You Like It. And he replied, "Why not? They are all Japanese." Shakespeare's works are emotional, hilarious, and pithy. But above all, he was masterful at imbuing his stories and characters with qualities that audiences and readers identify with. Hamlet's anguish, Ophelia's distress, the enduring love between Romeo and Juliet. And Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra has appeared in different media formats. And here is how it appeared in graphics and animation.
Hello and welcome to our video summary covering all you need to know about William Shakespeare's play, Antony and Cleopatra. This is a particularly useful video to watch, especially if you have exams coming up on this play, and it's equally useful if you're writing a coursework on Antony and Cleopatra, as we get to the heart of all the essential elements you need to mention if you want to get top marks in your writing. So this play was written in around 1606, and Antony and Cleopatra is considered to be one of Shakespeare's great historical love stories. The plot is based on Thomas North's translation of Plutarch's Lives, and it follows the relationship between Cleopatra and Mark Antony from the time of the Sicilian revolt to Cleopatra's suicide during the final war of the Roman Republic. However, before we get into the details of the play itself, it's first essential to look at context relating to where the play takes place, as well as key issues it explores at the time. So this is another one of Shakespeare's historical plays. However, unlike many of his historical plays about the rulers of England, this one might be more generous in its interpretation of its characters, as there would have been very little information about what these people were really like. The Roman conquering of Egypt could likely be compared to many other scenarios of colonization in the world around Shakespeare's time. So the themes that are explored in this play are still very relevant to his audience during the Elizabethan era. Now, let's first begin with a summary of what this play is about in a nutshell. The story begins by showing us Mark Antony, and he's one of the three rulers of the Roman Empire at the
Screen share. இது செலக்ட் பண்ண பாருங்க. Next screen. Next screen.
Shakespeare's greatest creation is Cleopatra. And Shakespeare's Cleopatra is the real historical Cleopatra, the rare Egyptian who is individualized and placed before us. In this character, Shakespeare portrays all her mental accomplishments, her unequaled grace, her woman's wit and woman's wiles, her irresistible allurements, her starts of irregular grandeur, her bursts of ungovernable temper, her vivacity of imagination, her petulant caprice, her fickleness and her falsehood, her tenderness and her truth, her childish susceptibility to flattery, her magnificent spirit, her royal pride, the gorgeous Eastern coloring of the character. That's why a French critic says that it seems Shakespeare has seized all the contradictory elements, seized them and mingled them in their extremes and fused them into one brilliant impersonation of classical elegance, oriental voluptuousness, and gypsy sorcery. Shakespeare's Cleopatra produces exactly the same effect on us that is recorded of the real Cleopatra. She dazzles our faculties, perplexes our judgment, bewilders and bewitches our fancy, and from the beginning to the end of the drama, we are conscious of a kind of fascination against which our moral sense rebels, but from which there is no escape. And how she undergoes a kaleidoscopic change of moods is shown in Act 1 of Scene 3. Here it is.
Stop the video.
Where is he? I did not see him since. See where he is. Who's with him? What he does. I did not send him. If you find him sad, say I am dancing. If in mirth, report that I am sudden sick. Quick, and return. Madam, methinks if you did love him dearly, you not hold the method to enforce the like from him. What? Should I do? I do not in each thing. Give him way, cross him in nothing. Now teach us like a fool. Way to lose him. Not so too far. I wish for bad. Time, we hate that which we often fear. Here comes Anthony. I am sick and sullen.
I'm sorry to give breathing to my purpose.
Oh, help me away, dear Charmian. I shall fall. It cannot be thus long. The sides of nature will not sustain it.
Now, my dearest queen.
Stand farther from me.
What's the matter?
Oh, by that same eye, there's some good news. What says the married woman? You may go, but she's never given you leave to come. And do not change his eye and keep you here. I have no power upon you, as you are.
The gods
Oh,
best
never
know.
was their queen, so might in every trade. Yet at the first, I saw the treasons plot.
Cleopatra.
Why should I think you can be mine and true, though you in swearing shake the throne and gods who have been false to Fulvia? Right is madness, to be entangled with those mouth-made vows which break themselves in swearing.
But sweet
How
queen.
dare you seek no colour for your going, but bid farewell and go. When you sued staying, oh, then was the time for words. No going then. Eternity was in our lips and eyes, bliss in our brows bent. None our parts so poor, but was a race of heaven. They are so still. Without the greatest soldier in the world, was turned the greatest lion.
Oh, no.
As we have already said, Shakespeare understood the power of language, its ability to paint landscapes, create atmospheres, and bring alive compelling characters. And we get a whole lot of famous lines from Shakespeare. To be or not to be, that's the question from Hamlet. One that loved not wisely, but too well, which brings out the essence of the play, Othello. And King Lear says it philosophically, as flies to wanton boys, are we to gods, they kill us for their sport. And we get these famous lines from the sonnet, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds. Sweet are the uses of adversity from As You Like It. All the world is a stage and all the men and women merely players from the same play. And be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And here are a few observations on love. For where there is any author in the world, teaches such beauty as a woman's eye, from love's labors lost. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged, cubit painted, blind. From Midsummer Night's Dream, the lunatic, the lover, and the poet, they are all of imagination, compact from the same play. Patch grief with the proverbs from much ado about nothing. We get a piece of advice also. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Frailty, thy name is woman. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. Brevity is the soul of wit. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And some of the observations on human behavior, the devil can cite scripture for his purpose from the Merchant of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained, it blesseth both the giver and the recipient. Cowards die many times before their death, but the brave never taste of death but once. And the evil that men do lives after them, and the good is often interred with their bones from Julius Caesar. This is the sonnet I already referred to. Okay. For want of time, I'm stopping here. And I'm very sorry that there was some technical problem. Hope the learned audience will understand it and forgive me. Thanks a lot for your patience. Over to the organizer.
Sir? Thank you, sir. Dear participants, kindly post your questions in the chat box. Sir, here is the one question from the participant.
Okay.
Whether the free verse and sonnets are still fashionable with the young writers, how far will you connect the sonnets of Shakespeare to connect with the 21st century readers? Your view, sir?
Okay. Even though they were written much before, they still have relevance. For example, the sonnet I have mentioned talks about love, which is true for all time. So all Shakespeare's plays have transcended time, and sonnets have also they have proved their usefulness.
Sir, one more question, sir.
Okay.
How do you connect Shakespeare with the pandemic times?
And as I said, there are several ways of reading and enjoying Shakespeare. And these digital resources or ICT resources, they come to our rescue, and they prove they come handy in teaching Shakespeare. And we can give the links, or we can give the URLs and ask our students to get benefit. I think we will stop here because it is already 6:20, and I don't want to test the patience of the viewers.
Sir, one more question, sir, from the participants.
Okay.
What is the responsibility of the English teachers to bring?
Can you repeat the question?
What is the responsibility of the English teachers to bring?
What is the responsibility of the English teachers?
To bring.
I don't get the last part of the word question.
So what is the responsibility of English teachers to bring in the Shakespeare to digital natives?
Okay. We need to, it is imperative that we remain updated, and the technology will help us in remaining up to date. So this way, a knowledge of how technology works will help our English language teaching fraternity.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay.
It is my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on the behalf of English Department and the volunteers, extend a hearty thanks to the Honorable Resource Person, Mr. V.G. Chandra Mohan, for enlightening us with his enriched ideas. I express my deep gratitude to the participants. Thank you, Anandan. We will meet tomorrow.
Feedback. Okay. In good time. Indonesia.
எல்லாரும் பாசிட்டிவ் ஃபீட்பேக். சாட் படிச்சு உட்கார்ந்திருந்தேன் சார் ஃபுல்லா. கீழ
Okay.
அடிச்சிட்டே இருக்காங்க. உங்களுக்கு இந்த
அது அவங்க இல்ல அவங்க சொல்லினே இருக்காங்க, ரெக்கார்ட் ஆயிருக்கு, லைவ் ரெக்கார்ட் செக்ஷன் நீங்க கெடுக்காதீங்க அப்படிதாங்க.
சில பேருக்கு வந்து கேஷுவலா பேசி ஃபார்மாலிட்டி உட்கார்ந்து போறவங்க ஒரு
லீவ்
4 பேர்
கொடுங்க
சார்.
சார், லீவ்.
லீவ் கொடுங்க. சார் க்ளோஸ் ஆயிடுச்சு. நான் வெளியில போச்சு.